heard about the UAPs, UFOs, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So what? Okay, tell us about that.
So I got Men in Blacked. I know a lot of people are going to be like, that's crazy, but
In the shadowy world of ufology, few names resonate with as much mystery and intrigue as Albert Bender. His experiences gave birth to one of the most enduring and unsettling legends in modern folklore, the Men in Black. Albert Bender was no ordinary UFO enthusiast. As a founder of the International Flying Saucer Bureau in the early 1950s, he was on the cutting edge of uncovering extraterrestrial truths. What happened when he got too close? On a chilling night in 1953, Bender claims to have been visited by three shadowy figures that would come to be known as the Men in Black. More than just mysterious visitors, these entities seemed determined to silence him, wielding an aura of fear and control that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Who were these dark-suited figures? Government agents sent to cover up the truth, or something far more otherworldly? And what secrets did they force Bender to bury deep within his mind? Join us as we delve into the harrowing tale of Albert Bender and the Men in Black, a story of intrigue, fear, and the lengths some will go to keep the ultimate secrets hidden. Today we will explore the curious case of Albert Bender and the Men in Black, a term coined and popularized by Albert, the man who founded the International Flying Saucer Bureau, or IFSB, in 1952. Most of us are familiar with the popular movie starring Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones of the same name. However, digging deeper into this case, you soon realize that these beings in the likeness of men may not be agents of the US federal government. You discover these feds may be from another world or dimension with traits more ominous than that of UFOs or even ghosts. To understand these elusive creatures and what they might be, we must return to Genesis 6. And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the earth, and the daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took for them wives of all which they chose. And God said, My spirit shall not always strive with men, for that he is also flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. The same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. In English, we use the word giant to describe a human or animal that is disproportionately larger than the acceptable parameters we recognize. If we examine the etymology of the word giants in Greek, however, it means gigas, which describes a race of divine but savage beings believed to be the children of Gaia, who were known for their size and strength. The word was later adopted into Latin, followed by the Old French gint and the Old English word ent, meaning devourers or jotun, which is the Old Norse word for gods or other non-human figures such as dwarves and elves. In the 1600s, the word changed to mean person of extraordinary size and strength. It is unclear why they changed the meaning, and not to be too conspiratorial, however, the King James Bible was published in 1611 and had that pesky passage in which people could now read the Bible in their own vulgar tongue. So perhaps the powers that be decided to change it to a new meaning so as not to alarm all the folks. More modern Bibles use the Hebrew word Nephilim, and the etymology of Nephilim is more descriptive, meaning fallen ones, Nephil, a bully or a tyrant. They are not always considered extraordinarily large. However, there is always something different about them. Too many or too few digits, too small or too large, something distinctively unhuman about them. The Book of Enoch is controversial in many quarters. Scholars argue for its inclusion in the canon of the 66 books of the Bible. However, others call it Jewish mysticism, and many Christians claim it's witchcraft. Why all the controversy? It's a set of 3 books. Historians and theologians claim book 1 was written before Christ, and books 2 and 3 were written after. There are references in the Bible made to book 1 in Peter as well as Jude. However, books 2 and 3 were written in the 1st and 2nd century by Jewish rabbis, and some claim they did it to muddy the waters because of Enoch's accurate description of what happened. If we look to the book of Enoch in chapter 6, which is ironic because it's Genesis 6 and then it's Enoch 6, however, it says, quote, "And it came to pass when the children of men had multiplied in those days, they were born unto them beautiful and comely daughters. So the angels saw them and said to one another, Come, let us choose wives from the number of children of men and get us children." These angels were known as watchers, and their job was to keep an eye on the human race. One day, their leader, Samjeza, decided to step out of the heavenly realm and onto earth at Mount Hermon. Unbeknownst to him, other angels were watching, 200, who were lusting after the beautiful woman. Meeting with Samjeza after he did that, the watchers made a pact that they would all be responsible for the wrath of God that would be inflicted on them if they agreed to come to earth. The watchers met with humans. They made agreements where their daughters would marry them in exchange for technology and knowledge. They taught the humans how to make swords, knives, shields, breastplates. They taught them about all the precious metals on earth, the art of jewelry making, and even how to apply makeup. They taught them about human and animal anatomy, and one of the watchers named Azazel taught them enchantments and magic and the cutting of roots. He taught them the course of the clouds, the sun and the moon, and the woman then gave birth to children. And these children were giants, measuring 55 ells. An ell is about 52 centimeters, which is about 3.5 kilometers or 2 miles tall. As a result of their large stature, they depleted all the meat, fruit, and food sources and eventually consumed humans, which the book describes that they committed sin against every kind of animal and human. So the entire earth was now corrupted, and the humans cried out to God for help. The angels Michael, Uriel, Raphael, and Gabriel looked down from heaven, heard the cries of the people, saw the bloodshed and lawlessness, and reported the following back to God. Lord of lords, God of gods, King of kings, and God of the ages. The throne of thy glory standeth unto all the generations of the ages, and thy name holy and glorious and blessed unto all the ages. Thou hast made all things, and power over all things hast thou. And all things are naked and open in thy sight. And thou seest all things, and nothing can hide itself from thee. Thou seest what Azazel hath done, who hath taught all unrighteousness on earth, and revealed the eternal secrets which were preserved in heaven, which men were striving to learn. And Samjeza, to whom thou hast given authority to bear rule over his associates. And they have gone to the daughters of men upon the earth, and have slept with the woman, and have defiled themselves, and revealed to them all kinds of sin. And the women have borne giants, and the whole earth is thereby filled with blood and unrighteousness. And now behold, the souls of those who have died are crying and making their suit to the gates of heaven. and their lamentations have ascended and cannot cease because of the lawless deeds which are wrought on the earth. And thou knowest all things before they come to pass, and thou seest these things, and thou dost suffer them, and thou dost not say to us what we are to do to them in regard to thee. God says, get Noah. What does this have to do with Albert Bender and the Men in Black? The men who visited with Albert and many others who have had UFO sightings or experiences are said to provoke carnage. Victims claim they are spectators from another dimension, causing chaos and paranoia, leaving those who fall upon their path in absolute fear. Known as the Trinity of Evil, they always travel in groups of 3, and in nearly every encounter with these beings, they always seem human with slightly something off. Either there's an oddity with their clothing, it's either old-fashioned, or even more alarming, clothing that only comes out years later. They drive black cars, usually Cadillacs in the USA and Jaguars in the British Isles. Always brand new, however, very old models. They're usually male but can be female. They differ in height. Their skin is either unusually pale or dusky, and they have strange slanted eyes, no body hair, and overly thin red lips. The movie, The Men in Black, portrays them as federal agents protecting the human race from unknown galaxies. In reality, they have an angelic aura about them. They intend to prevent the UFO agenda, especially the disclosure agenda, from ever seeing the light of day. With the world demanding answers on UFO disclosure, it's easy to see how people could believe them to be federal agents, especially with this large distrust of governments of late. Victims, however, are adamant these are supernatural beings from another world. Some have even suggested time travelers. The trio of mysterious men usually show up after a UFO sighting, first with a phone call and demands to come over at once. The victim provides their address, phone call, and invites them over immediately, a behavior they would not normally do. Less than a minute after the phone call, a slow, deliberate pounding on the door. And these 3 strange beings enter your home. On June 24th, 1947, at 3 p.m., Kenneth Arnold was flying in the Cascade Mountains when he saw 9 saucer-shaped aircraft on the southwest side of Mount Rainier in Washington State, United States of America. He recalled that less than 5 minutes after takeoff, a bright flash reflected in his plane, startling him. He looked and saw a peculiar saucer craft flying from north to south approximately 9,500 feet. Noticing the craft did not have wings or any vapors, a veteran pilot and accustomed to all kinds of airborne objects and confused and frustrated, once he landed, these feelings would escalate in him when nobody in the military could explain to this pilot what these sources were. Unsatisfied, he reported the sighting to the media, and this is known as the first documented and widely reported UFO case in history. He described the craft as saucers, and hence the name Flying Saucers was born. In 1947, Albert Bender, 33, lived in Bridgeport, Connecticut, USA, and he was fascinated with all strange and unearthly phenomena, predating the Kenneth Arnold sighting. About a year before that, in December 5th, 1945, a squadron of Avenger-class aircraft with 19 souls on board vanished under mysterious circumstances, a controversy that still provokes people today. After the disappearance, a Mariner flying boat departed from the Naval Air Station base in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, to search for the missing squadron, only themselves to go missing, never to be found again. And this is now known as the infamous Bermuda Triangle law, which hooked Albert in. So when news broke of the Kenneth Arnold sighting, Albert was immediately enthralled. In the years prior, he'd been digging into all kinds of strange phenomena, even getting into witchcraft, profoundly studying the collective works of one of the most renowned chroniclers of all things, strange and paranormal, Charles Fort, who is the founder of the equally renowned 14 magazine. Albert immediately purchased a telescope and studied all his paranormal books, journals, newspaper clippings. He spent hours scanning the night sky, hoping that he could see these visitors. He was using his Ouija board to try and communicate with them, whatever he could to try and get in touch with the sources. Albert lived on the third floor of his stepfather's home, which had a little offshoot attic where he spent all his time. He struggled with his mental health, suffering from obsessive compulsive disorder, and he was particular about where he placed his items, becoming highly agitated with any change. His friends accused him of being overly fussy, and from childhood he had a belief that at any moment he would contract some dreadful cancer. Friends noticed that after the Kenneth Arnold sighting, his behavior began to change subtly at first. However, it did escalate. One night, he decided to paint his walls in this little attic with demonic monsters coming through the walls, a project that would take him 8 months to complete and which he later remarked, quote, "So strange, they're looking directly at me," unquote. Calling it his chamber of horrors and having dreamed of one day turning the entire third floor into a library of all things terrifying. If you hear squeaking in the background, I'm really sorry about that, but I can't shut him up and I need to get done with this recording. So let's carry on. The Bender family were no strangers to the paranormal either. Some family members had suffered severe afflictions. A cousin, as a child, was assaulted by a nightmarish woman known as the Woman in Black. Apologies for that. Who, according to Appalachian law, appears to children to manipulate them into unaliving themselves to take control over their souls at death. She also appears to men who have misbehaved or cheated on their wives or committed some other moral transgression. The Woman in Black is not the same as the WRB, who has the same agenda as the MRB. Usually they are dressed as a beautiful character that people have described as a James Bond movie. So Albert's auntie and uncle did everything they could to try and help their son, eventually deciding to spend every night with him to see what was happening. One night, as both the parents sat in the dark and their son slept, a black figure floated through the closed window and levitated over the sleeping child. When the parents lit a candle, it alerted the creature of their presence, and she quickly glared at them and disappeared. By 1950, UFOs and flying saucers had overtaken Albert's life. After associating with like-minded individuals, collecting and cross-referencing and investigating sightings, he embarked on an ambitious project establishing the International Flying Saucer Bureau, or IFSB, which was surprisingly successful. Within months, IFSB had branches in Great Britain, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and several other European countries, and I think Russia as well included. One night at the end of 1952, Albert received a phone call. His stepfather was out for the night. Picking up the phone, he instinctively knew someone was on the other side, even though there was an eerie silence. Suddenly, Albert became dizzy without warning. His heart began throbbing, forcing him to hang up and immediately retire to bed. A few days after this, once he felt well again, he decided to go to the movies. Sitting alone in a movie theater, he had a distinct feeling that someone was watching him. So when the movie ended, he quickly exited and carefully navigated his way down the dark sidewalk with a sense of dread, forcing him to quicken his pace, certain someone was following him home. Albert arrived home safely just before 3 a.m., quietly entered the home and made his way up to the third floor. Noticing a light emanating under the door, he flung the door open, and in the middle of the room, an eerie, glowing orb hung. As he stepped into the room, the orb disappeared, and a shadow of 3 men appeared in front of him. Suddenly, a putrid smell of sulfur filled the room, and the men faded, leaving only red eyes staring at him. By January 1953, saucer sightings had ramped up all over, keeping Albert and his team at the IFSB very busy. They had weekly meetings, and one night after the meeting, Albert was busy locking up when he heard footsteps up on the third floor. Believing it might have been one of the team that had left a hat behind, he went upstairs. To his horror, he could see the same strange bluish light emanating under the door. Swinging his door open in irritation, in the middle of the room was that floating orb again, and it faded away, this time leaving 2 glowing eyes lingering, reminding Albert of the Cheshire Cat in Alice in Wonderland. Quickly he turned on the light, scanning the area, and that nasty sulfur smell again permeated his room. With the great success of the IFSB, Albert had the brilliant idea of having a World Contact Day, in which all members of IFSB would simultaneously attempt to make contact. The date was set for March 15, 1953, and the following instructions were airmailed to all members across the globe. Quote, members are asked to participate in an experiment that has not yet been attempted by any other group such as ours. We will attempt to send a message to the occupants of the sources, if they exist, by using telepathy. Each member will memorize the message on this form, and at the time designated, the member will close his eyes in a quiet, secluded spot, lie down if possible, and repeat this message in his mind. Do not repeat vocally. The letter continued. Saucer people can pick up mental telepathy. They certainly will be able to pick up a message that will be sent by hundreds of IFSB members. We may never know if this message has reached anyone, but if a sudden flurry of saucer sightings occur in 1953 or soon after our message, or even a saucer landing, we will know that we may have been indirectly responsible for it. Members must remember that in order for mental telepathy to work, you must not have troubles or worries of any kind in the back of your mind, as this will tend to distract. This experiment is not compulsory to anyone in IFSB. We merely ask you to volunteer your services and to try to make it successful. Everyone participating must do so at the time designated and not too soon before or after the time shown. We are sending this bulletin far enough in advance so that you may be sure to have your clock set correctly that day. And then they sent the message that everybody needed to memorize. And this was the message. Calling occupants of interplanetary craft that have been observing our planet, Earth. Your presence before us will be welcomed with the utmost friendship. We will do all in our power to promote mutual understanding between your people and the people of Earth. Please come in peace and help us in our earthly problems. Give us some sign that you have received our message. Be responsible for creating a miracle here on our planet to wake up the ignorant ones to reality. Let us hear from you. We are your friends." Unquote. The letter concluded by giving all the participants the time, which was 6 p.m. U.S. Eastern Standard Time. On March 15th, 1953, at precisely 6 p.m., Albert participated in the experiment. turning off the lights and laying quietly on the bed, confident that his years of study would help him solve the saucer mystery. Repeating the message 3 times and was about to repeat it the 4th when a sudden chill enveloped his body. His head began to ache, and a strange odor of decomposed eggs and burning sulfur filled his nostrils. Hardly losing consciousness as the room started to fade away, a small blue light swam through his brain and blinked a flashing light. He felt as though he was floating in a cloud, and his entire body was weightless as the throbbing pain in his temples overwhelmed him, when suddenly he was floating on a piece of ice. He later recalled, quote, "I was hovering all over it, about 3 feet in mid-air. Suddenly, I could hear a voice that permeated me, but in some way did not seem to be an inaudible sound. The voice came from the room before me, which remained pitch dark." Unquote. A being then spoke, but his lips never moved or said anything, and he said this,
"We have been watching you and your activities. Please be advised to discontinue delving into the mysteries of the universe. We will make an appearance if you disobey."
Disturbed by this, Albert asked, "Why are you not that friendly?" To which the being replied,
"We have a special assignment and must not be disturbed by your people. We are a man and know your every move. So please be advised that we are now on your earth and watching you."
As the words left him, a yellow mist filled the room, and a shadow of a man in a black suit with a Homburg-style hat and dusky face hid from view, when suddenly he faded before Albert's eyes. Feeling slightly dazed and bewildered, Albert fell asleep, having a terrifying nightmare that woke him quickly, and he glanced at the clock, and it was only 6:05 p.m. Confused by all of this that had taken place in such a small amount of time, Albert became suddenly violently ill. His stomach pained and his head throbbed, and a strange humming pierced his ears. He noticed his radio was turned on to a peculiar channel, and he quickly turned it off, and then he smelt that familiar sulfur filling his room again. After this event, Albert was a bit confused as what to do. He was fearful of sharing the experience with others because he didn't want to lose credibility, so he decided just to be quiet about this. He went on a 2-week vacation, and he decided that he would send a letter and a report on his return to the Pentagon, hoping that they could help him with more information. So on returning from vacation and walking into his bedroom, he immediately heard that the radio was on again and at that same peculiar channel. He again smelt that sulfur. Frustrated, he retired to bed when his head grew dizzy and began throbbing. In the corner of the room, 3 figures floated. Albert later described them as looking like clergymen, faces hidden under Homburg hats, when they lit up like light bulbs and telepathically conveyed this message to Albert.
"You have dedicated yourself to solving the strange problem of unidentified objects in your atmosphere. Your interest is deep and sincere, and you have devoted many hours to it. We also know that such interest and determination might lead to something that could bring you harm. We feel that you are an excellent contact for us on your planet. You are average, and we know that no one will believe what we tell you and show you. You might say you are not a person of great renown for your planet. Therefore, we have nothing to fear at present. We have a purpose for being here, and we will be here for some time. Yet we must not be disturbed by our ultimate goal. As you can see here, we are not in our natural form. We have found it necessary to take on the look of your people while we are here. This is mainly used as a means of returning here without being detected by anyone. We have made numerous contacts with Earth using craft from our own base, and currently have craft hidden at a remote spot on your planet. We have found it necessary to go to great extremes to frighten off Earth's people, and it has resulted in their deaths. We also find it essential to carry off Earth people, to use their bodies to disguise our own. We wish to keep in touch with you and tell you many things, because one day you will write about this, and we are confident nobody will believe you. But you will be much wiser than anyone else on your planet. You will know what is out there in space, and you will know what the future holds for mankind. You will see all three of us again, but we shall not reveal our names, as they would mean nothing to you. Refer to us as number 1, 2, or 3, and we will answer according to the number. We will leave you with a small piece of metal, similar to your coins. It is to be kept in a secret place of your own. We wish to have you come with us at the time. It'll be announced to you soon.
One of the men then hands Albert the metal object and tells him if he wishes to make contact, he should hold the metal tight and then repeat the words Cossack 3 times. They told him to turn the radio to that same peculiar dial and that they would make contact with him at the same time in 48 hours. Once they left, he was physically ill, but he was glad he finally had physical evidence and decided in the morning everyone would know what happened. So he took the little metal object and he locked it in a lockbox and he fell asleep. When he woke up the next morning, the first thing he did was run to the lockbox to go get the little metal object so he could tell everyone he now had evidence. Ran to the lockbox and he opened it and it was gone. This devastated Albert, and for 2 days he was so depressed. He didn't want to go to work. He didn't want to see anybody. He was miserable. However, on the third day, when he woke up, he ran to the lockbox and it was there again. And then he knew he should not tell anyone of this metal object. So as he stood in his room with the metal object in his hand, he switched the radio on again and he repeated Cossack 3 times. A few seconds later, he felt this freezing enveloping his body. His temples began throbbing again, and he felt an excruciating pain abound from behind his eyes. When an overwhelming power overtook his body, he immediately lay down and he had an extreme sense of guilt and fear as he sensed he was leaving his body. He looked back and could see his body lying on the bed as he slowly drifted away, and everything went dark. Suddenly, he was jolted awake as the darkness cleared and the movement stopped, and he was surrounded by a brilliant glow of light in a vast circular room with a glass dome. Albert was mesmerized. The walls were a steel substance that had an unusual glitter. He was seated in a chair which was the same metal as the object he had, and the strange bluish light emanated and then appeared in the likeness of a man. The strange-looking man spoke, but his lips never moved, saying,
"Welcome to our domain. We now meet under different conditions. You or we no other Earth creature has ever set foot. In this domain, you will witness things that will be most astounding to you. Things you did not know of your planet. Things that'll make you disbelieve what your very eyes are witnessing as it is conveyed."
The strange man motioned his hand and a large television screen appeared in a circle. Pictures on the screen explained to Albert that life on Earth would be under surveillance. The planet is an infant in progress and has far to go to accomplish what neighboring systems have achieved. He then shows Albert the Pentagon and says,
"I'm showing you this view. This is to inform you that we have some of our people stationed in your so-called Pentagon while visiting your planet. We have them stationed in numerous places about your planets to inform us of everything happening
He then shows Albert atomic stockpiles and threatens that they can detonate all the stockpiles. And then Albert stops him and he's like, why would you want to do such a horrible thing? To which the being bluntly replies that they will use everything in their arsenal if humans try to stop their agenda. He then motions his arm, switching off the TV, and he instantly shifts into a horrific monster. Albert later describes as looking like the Flatwood Monster in West Virginia, and then Albert loses consciousness. Once he returned to his room, the men in black told him not to tell anyone of this encounter or a terrible fate would befall him, and they instructed him that he could summon them at any time while they were concluding their business on Earth, but not to discuss any further issues about flying saucers or beings from other planets. Less than 6 months after the very successful IFSB, Albert shut it all down. Afraid of sharing information with the committee and the members, he advised them that he had a visit, but implied it was from the federal government rather than saying it was from some out-of-the-world visitors. Stunned, they began nagging Albert to explain what was going on. He refused, saying all members would be refunded, their fees would be sent to them, and he would never speak of the topic again. The men in black did visit Albert and make contact with him on occasions after that. They explained to Albert that when their business was completed on Earth, the small metal object would disappear and Albert would then be free to share everything they had shared with him. Fear and paranoia eventually overtook Albert's life. Albert refused to meet with friends. He did fall in love with one of the members of IFSB, Betty Rose, a divorcee from the United Kingdom, and even refused to tell her what was happening. He kept on receiving persistent telepathic messages, phone calls, and intrusions. If Betty Rose pressurized him too much, he would have the strange phone calls and then become physically ill. And finally, one day in 1962, Albert opened the lockbox and the little metal object was gone. He was finally free to share all the tales he had received from the men in black. Gray Barker, who was a very famous author and ufologist and a very good friend of Albert, wrote in his book, They Knew Too Much About UFOs, in 1956. He tried very hard to get Albert to spill the beans, but Albert never told him. And Gray speculated in this book that the men in black were federal agents. However, Albert then goes on to write his book called Flying Saucers and the Three Men, refuting the claim made by Gray. However, he did get Gray to write the foreword of this book. Many in the UFO community were quick to dismiss Albert's claims as hallucinations and blame it on his mental health issues. Others blamed it on a medical condition called Jacksonian epilepsy, which can result in a sufferer experiencing mild to moderate hallucinations and confusions. Others claim he just made it up out of whole cloth for fame or hoax. However, there are FOIA requests that later showed that FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover actually sought after Albert's book and Gray's book. Albert was not the only person who had experienced visitations by the nefarious men in black. There have been hundreds of cases dating back hundreds of years, telling stories of strange beings in the likeness of men terrorizing humans. In his book, The Mothman Prophecy, John Keel tells of countless people's encounters with these menacing beings, including reports of attempted kidnappings. Look out for my series on John Keel, a personal favorite of mine in the UFO community. Thank you so much for watching this video. Take care of yourselves. Tell me in the comments below, do you believe that they are men in black? Could they be real? Are they federal agents? Are they everything? Are they nothing? And just remember, if you ever encounter any strange being, remember that as a human, you have dominion on this earth, and as such, claim your dominion in the name of Jesus Christ. And I will see you guys next time. Cheers.